Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name's Sarah Harper. I'm the head of events here at IPSE, and today we're delighted to welcome back Alistair Morris from the CV Interview Advisors. Hi Alistair, good to have you back with us today. Alistair is going to be delivering a presentation on how to hack a contract brief and use advanced application strategies to win more contract work. So I'll hand over to him in a second. Before I do, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Alistair today, please feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A box. The Q&A box goes directly to Alistair and he'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. And if you want to put anything into the chat about today's webinar or any comments, or you can talk to everyone else that's also here today, please feel free to use that as well. And in case you do miss anything today, we will be recording the webinar. So we will be sending you an email tomorrow with the recording link on it and a few other bits that will be discussed in today's webinar as well. But for now, Alistair, I'll turn my webcam off and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. The session is quite an interesting one. Oh, I'm bound to say that anyway, I'm biased, but it's the rather insane level of detail that some people do go to win work by differentiating themselves through their CV typically. And it's sort of a bit of a health warning, I guess, to start with. Not everyone will need to do everything that I'm about to go through, but if you're struggling to get access to opportunities, it just shows you some of the scope available to improve how you present yourself to the big bad world. For the benefit of those that have never been on one of our webinars before, just a brief intro. I've spent the last 14 years here at the CV and Interview Advisors, and my day job revolves around talking with people like you and your competitors, understanding what works in the world of winning work and what doesn't. I talk to hiring managers, HR folk, recruiters, search consultants, decision makers, basically. And we take all of that knowledge and insight and distill it into these webinars, obviously focusing on a particular subject matter. The day job of the organization that I represent, the CV and Interview Advisors, is to help people like you and your competitors present themselves more effectively and win more work, which all sounds fine and dandy. The critical thing here is it does work. It's proven. It is beyond any doubt these days. And I guess that's the most important thing. We have a lot of people, some of them IPSE members, come to us for help. They pay us some money. They expect a return on their investment. And I'm pleased to say in the vast majority of cases, that's exactly what we get and what we offer. And we've won awards for what we do, specifically in the contracting scene, the world of winning work as a business rather than as a job seeker. Hopefully that just gives you a little bit of confidence, should it be required. Accompanying this webinar, if anybody's interested, it's not a you must have this to participate in the webinar, but it's just extra information if you're so inclined, is a workbook that we now put together to support these events. The way you access that is you zap the QR code that's on the screen. So it's only going to be there for a few seconds because I don't have time to pause here for too long. And excuse me. And when you've zapped the QR code, you should have a WhatsApp message pre-populated with the characters IPSE 081024. Hit send, and that will set off in motion some digital wonders, and you'll get the workbook. If the message isn't pre-populated with those characters, just type it in. So that's IPSE 081024, and then hit send. Just a few background points about IR35, which are important in terms of how you should be presenting yourself. Don't want to go into details. I'm not an IR35 expert. There are people at IPSE who are far more qualified to give advice on this. But there are some things that a lot of contractors forget when they put their CV together. So I said earlier, I speak to people like you and your competitors. A healthy and a substantial minority of those contractors, I'd say in the 40% kind of category, still have a CV that looks too much like a job seeker CV. Every single day, certainly of this week and of last week, and as far back as I can remember, I see contractor CVs, and it's really difficult to spot that they're a contractor. And if you're going for outside IR35 roles these days, that just doesn't help the cause. You really do need to make sure you're presenting yourself as a business, not as a job seeker. So before we get into any of the detail as to what can be done to tailor your message to really nail that opportunity, you've just got to remember that you're a business. You should present yourself as a business. It should be obvious that you're a business. And someone like me should be able to pick up your CV and think, okay, we're dealing with a professional contractor, self-employed individual, freelancer, whatever. Not, is this person really ready to go as a contractor? Are they a job seeker who's just taken voluntary redundancy and fancies a chance in the marketplace? People ought not to be thinking that. And there are some reasons on the screen as to why that's important. Just draw attention to maybe a couple. HMRC need to see money going out as well as coming in of a genuine business, and that ought not just to be on coffees and Danish pastries. By the way, CVs, LinkedIn profiles, any marketing collateral that basically is in place to help you win work is a legitimate business expense. So what we do and what we might be able to do for you is a legitimate business expense. And the second key issue, which I've really touched on already to some degree, is just make sure you're looking like you're trading as an operator, not a job seeker. Do not be confused with a PAYE job seeker. So there are a number of things that you can do, a number of steps that you should take to position yourself well for any work that you might be trying to win. Some of you may do this already. Some of you may think it's not possible. And I have to admit, some of this early material, it's a bit ideal world stuff. It's, there's no harm in asking, but I can't guarantee for sure that you're going to get the right answers to the questions if you can get hold of anybody at all, in fairness. So firstly, interrogating the recruiter or the intermediary, whoever that may be. It may be an internal HR person, maybe an internal recruiter. It may be the hiring manager directly. It may be a third-party agency or some such. Why would you ask questions? Well, let's assume that you can ask questions of somebody. The reason behind this is to get information. Information is power. The more information you have, the better you can tailor your specific interest in a given role or piece of work. They may seem quite simple, but let's just look at some of these questions. So are they the sole recruiter or intermediary, or are there other agencies involved? What does this tell you? Well, if they're the sole recruiter, that recruiter's probably been properly briefed. They probably know the organization quite well. They may even have a deep relationship with them over the last few years. That's to your advantage. They should be able to give you good information. When compared to 10 agencies all chasing the same population or chunk of the population for a role, because the organization's had a right nightmare trying to find the right people, and they've just said basically, look, find anybody that moves and breathes, that meets the basic qualifications, and if we like some of those people, you might get your fee. That's not great. That tells you something about the organization, in my view, and the view of others as well. So that just tells you how the organization's set up, how keen/desperate they may be to find the right person, and how they go about the basic sourcing of individuals and talent in their business. I'm sure some of you have spotted opportunities in the past and you've wondered whether they're actually real or fake. Sadly, there's not a lot you can do about that. Asking these questions may give you some clues, and that might then inform whether you move forward or not. Ultimately, that's your call, your business. But it's good to ask questions about the role, the organization, hiring organization, that is, to find out whether this representative, this intermediary, actually knows their stuff or not. And that might tell you whether it's actually not a real role. If you spotted an opportunity that's been around the block a few times or has been advertised, posted for some time, it would imply that maybe others have been there already and you're following other people's footsteps. If that's the case, why have other contractors been rejected? Particularly if you've seen the advert, then it goes quiet, then you see the advert again days, weeks later. Again, just giving you information. Obviously, then you want to find out what the essential and then the desirable requirements for the role are, because if you've got that information, you can pitch your message accordingly, and we'll get into how you do that later. And hopefully self-explanatory, you'd want to know a little bit about what the objectives for the role are. And linked to that, you can figure out whether they're realistic or not. I mean, I've certainly in the past applied for jobs where the organizations had certainly keen objectives, ambitious objectives, but sometimes too ambitious. There are certain marketplaces, certain cycles of trade that you just can't do anything about. It takes an amount of time to do something, whether you like it or not. And if you just suddenly decide that you'd like to halve that amount of time because you're feeling ambitious, it doesn't change the fact that that marketplace is geared the way it's geared. And you might look at that and think, actually, that's unrealistic. I know my stuff. You can't do what you're trying to do. I admire your ambition and enthusiasm, but you just can't do that. It won't work. And you may want to walk away as a consequence. Up to you at the end of the day. But again, you're just gathering information. If you've got a really good intermediary, they may even be able to guide you on what that organization, decision maker, hiring manager, whoever really would like to see on your CV, which seems obvious, doesn't it? It's almost like, wow, if you could actually find somebody who could tell you how to best present yourself, wouldn't you take their advice? Well, I would, if you trusted their information, of course. So these are very basic questions, but a lot of people don't bother asking them. And I think sometimes it's because they just fear they're not going to get hold of anybody, or it'll be a waste of someone's time. Well, if it's a waste of someone's time, they're probably going to tell you. You're probably going to judge that you've just maybe overstepped the mark, but there's no harm in trying. Once you've got some information, you need to obviously present that in a certain form or fashion. And I'm going to show you how in some detail later on in this session, how you go about that. But obviously that means you've got to have a CV. Now, the first bullet point on this slide might not mean anything to you if you've never been on one of our earlier sessions. We'd also encourage anybody out there, but particularly people selling their wares, to have what we'd call a career or professional autobiography. We'll talk more about that shortly, so I will come back to that. But yes, of course, you're going to need a CV. Ideally, you're going to need a CV with some decent content. And if it's structured properly, in other words, if it's modular by nature, you'll be able to easily tailor that CV for a specific opportunity. It's incredibly useful these days if you've got extra content that you can pitch at your audiences, which means you've got to pre-prepare this stuff. So a lot of people, I think, realize they've got to tailor their CV these days. I think a lot of people don't realize to what degree. You're going to realize sometime soon how detailed that approach can be. And we would support that. We'd say, yeah, you've really got to tailor the message. That is one way to guarantee a much higher level of success in winning work, is to tailor the CV and then tailor it some more when you think you've already tailored it. A lot of people are put off because they think that takes time and effort. It will do to start with, but once you've prepared the baseline, the foundation stones, if you like, and you've got a breadth of content, and if it's written in the right way and your CV is structured in the right way, it literally then becomes a lift and shift exercise to tailor the CV. And I promise you, it can take minutes rather than hours or days to tailor a CV. Over and above that, you're going to need a good LinkedIn profile. That's quite different from a CV. Self-evidently, if you're targeting a CV to a specific role, you can't do that on LinkedIn. So the two have to be different. You've only got one LinkedIn profile, so you can't be forever tinkering around with that because you don't know who's looking at it, when, or why. So LinkedIn has to be a much broader, different proposition from any one of your CV variants. Some of you may be asked for a supporting statement. We'll get into that later. I said I'd come back to the career autobiography. Here's roughly what it would look like. It's not complicated, but it's a really powerful tool, and it genuinely is a game changer. So a professional or career autobiography is simply a record of your professional experiences across your career so far. Doesn't matter in what guise that was, whether it's contract, permanent, freelance, whatever, doesn't matter. But over time, you record by competence or skill area notable experiences that you've had. Now, on the example on the screen here, we've got a spreadsheet. Doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, just makes it a bit easier, we think. Across the bottom, a series of tabs, each tab representing a skill area or competence. Currently highlighted project management, and it would appear that this individual's recorded 2 examples of where they've delivered project management in the past, one on line 3, one on line 5. As you accumulate experiences, you make a record only for your eyes at this stage of the things that you've been up to. If you really want to take this to the nth degree of sophistication. You'd also create tabs for the skills you don't currently have, but you know you're going to need in the future to achieve the objectives you may have. So let's, for example, say you wanted to be head of something, program director, something of where managing a team was really important, but you'd never managed a team. So a wise idea would be to create a tab with team management on it. It will be blank, but it will be haunting you in a positive way that you need to do something about that before you start getting too excited about achieving those loftier roles that you'd be interested in the future. So it becomes a career planning document, which is useful. But critically, what this really becomes is a really rich repository of information to demonstrate to whoever you need to demonstrate to that you've achieved certain competencies or skill areas. And when they want that evidence, which they will, you have it, rather than you having to desperately try and remember when you did something, where you did it, what happened, what was the conclusions. It'll be in your career or professional autobiography. It'll already be there. And I'll show you later how you present that information in various ways. So this is where we get into a bit of the detail now, that some of which may seem self-evident, some of which may be practiced by some folk already, but some of you begin to think, really, is this really necessary? Well, as I said, it's not necessary if you've got a track record of getting lots of interviews for the work that you're interested in. If you submit a CV or a LinkedIn profile to some third party in pursuit of an opportunity and you get access to that opportunity, well, then happy days. Keep doing whatever you're doing until that luck runs out. But if you are struggling to get access to those opportunities, this kind of stuff could make a difference. So what we recommend when clients come to us for help is we say, look, take the brief, the advertisement, whatever it is you've got, information from those questions that you asked early doors of the intermediary, get all of that raw data, chuck it into your word processor of choice, and get rid of all the fluffy stuff. So we're looking for a dynamic, passionate, such and such. Get rid of all of that. No one's interested in that at this moment in time. It's not of any help. Focus on the technical and functional requirements of the role. Lurking in the brief or the information you have should be an overarching reason as to why that role exists. Why on earth does the business want to engage somebody to perform a particular role, a role mission, if you like? Find it. It'll be there somewhere. And of course, there'll be the key requirements of the role, and they might helpfully be split essential and desirable or something very similar. Keep an eye on the order in which this information is presented. Normally, a brief, an advertisement, a posting will flow in the order of importance. It's very rare that the least important thing to the organization is at the top of the brief, self-evidently. Pick up on that. That's useful. That should flow through your CV. So the important stuff should be on page 1, and the less important stuff should be on page 2 or 3. I said earlier, get rid of all of the fluffy nonsense. So things like, dynamism, passion, motivation, drive, reliability, punctuality, the ability to work in a team or as an individual, all of that stuff's utter nonsense at this point in time. All valuable skills, don't get me wrong, but not relevant to mention on a CV in pursuit of a piece of work for anybody, let alone a contractor, consultant, freelancer, or whatever. So get rid of all of the soft personal behavioral traits and focus on the technical and functional skills only. And critically, pick up on the organization's terminology. So if you've got skills A, B, C, and the organization's looking for people with skills X, Y, Z, because that's what they've called them, but they're the same skills, refer to them as X, Y, and Z on your CV. It's called linguistic mirroring. It seems obvious, hardly anybody does it. Most people have a CV which looks remarkably similar no matter who they're sending it to. Now, these days, the organizations or their representatives will have set up applicant tracking systems, algorithms, search criteria to reflect their terminology, because that's all they know. They won't know your terminology, so they're not going to set up their systems with your terminology in mind, which means if you submit a CV or a LinkedIn profile that has the wrong content, so far as the algorithms are concerned, you're automatically tripping the wrong triggers. In fact, you won't be tripping any triggers at all. You'll just get rejected. That happens an awful lot, sadly. to some really talented people. So pick up on the terminology of the organization, because that's what they'll be looking for. Look for clues as to what the real business needs are. That could be in the brief and the advertisement. It certainly ought to be in any conversations you've had with people where you've been able to elicit any information at all, because then you can pitch that very message in your CV, LinkedIn profile. So, for example, let's say you've spotted an organization, it's a great role. They're having a real nightmare migrating from system A to system B. And it might be a casual mention somewhere, or somebody might have muttered it under their breath in a conversation with you. Don't ignore that. Don't think, well, when I get to interview, I'll have a chat with them about that because I'm really good at it. Get it on the CV, the LinkedIn profile, because that could make the difference. All of this information then can be reverse engineered into your CV. How are we going to do that? Well, first of all, of course, you need a CV. Most of you will have a CV, of course. Statistically, I'm sad to say, most of your CVs aren't going to be very good. Not my figures, but I do agree with them. 80% of the CVs that recruiters tend to see are judged to be weak, ineffective, poor. 80%. Interestingly, if you ask individuals whether they think their CV is any good or not, you'll get 80% thinking they've got no problem at all. Their CV is good, strong, effective. And sadly, some people have been told their CV is good or a strong CV when it isn't. But fortunately, there's a dead easy, expensive, but dead easy way of finding out whether your CV is any good or not. Just apply for opportunities. If you apply for 10 opportunities, you get 10 interviews or expressions of interest. Happy days. Nothing wrong with your CV. If you do that and you get zero response, there's something very wrong with your CV. So you can assess the market for free, other than it burns through some real opportunities you might have been interested in. If you've structured the CV properly, as I hinted at earlier, it will take very little time at all to build a tailored CV that will, if not guarantee interviews, because no one can guarantee interviews, it will put you at the top of the pile or very close to it. Because you've got to remember, one advantage you have just by attending this webinar is that there'll be lots of people who won't be doing any of this, who could be really talented individuals, but on page, literally on the page or on the screen, they just won't look that good. They won't look relevant to the organization and they'll get rejected. So if you only did a little bit of this, there's a good chance you just are nudging yourself up towards the top of the pile. So the way we structure CVs makes it super easy to tailor the message. And I'll show you how we do that very shortly, of course. I said earlier, right at the beginning of this session, what we do works. We've been doing this for best part of, trying to do the maths, 15, 16 years or so now. And it works. We get the responses. We know what we recommend actually makes a difference. We have people who literally come to us, sometimes shell-shocked, desperate, thinking, why am I not getting the traction that I need? We do some stuff. They remain the very same person they were when they walked through our front door, so to speak. Yet when they leave, they start getting interest and traction. They've not changed. They've not taken any other accreditations or trainings. They've not gone back to university or school or college. They've just presented themselves in a more effective way. Now, if you remember when I said use your career or professional autobiography, and that will feed into a good CV, it will. So it does imply that you start recording that information, unless you've got a fantastic memory, you can just access this stuff quickly. The folk who get rejected are often quite capable of performing the role that they were interested in. The reason they get rejected is because on the page, on the screen, they just didn't look relevant to their organizations or their target organization's requirements. So I said I'd show you a CV. I'm going to show you some CVs, as it turns out. Different styles for different circumstances. Here we've got Matt. Matt is our MD. He really exists, not that that really matters. Here's a CV style that would suit anybody targeting a permanent role or an inside IR35 role. So you can judge that there are going to be some differences when we get to outside IR35, which indeed there are. We don't have time to get into the detail of this, but page one, super important. You've got the text at the top, tailored to the specific role Matt might be interested in. You've got some key skills tailored to the specific role Matt would be interested in, using the organization's terminology, not yours. You've then got three, we're calling them career highlights. They're case studies. They're demonstrating why Matt could perform the three most important requirements of the role. So again, tailored specifically to a specific opportunity. It's those three sections that will make or break your chances, generally speaking. Now, interestingly, none of those deal with your career history. That's all to follow. You can see that lurking down the bottom of page 1, probably a lot lower than you may be opening up on your current CV with your career history. That is done for a specific reason. It's to defer the point at which people find out what you're doing, because what you need to focus on is the building the business case as to why people should be interested in you. If you do that well with the right tailored content, there's a strong chance by now someone will already put you in the yes pile or the maybe pile. And that's the objective. It's not about someone reading the whole document. The chances of them doing that are incredibly small, interestingly. What it is about is convincing someone to take a positive next step so far as you're concerned. You need to be in the game, whatever the next stage of that game is. And that's all about page 1 and the top 3/4 of page 1. What about if you're looking for outside IR35 roles? Well, very similar style of CV at first glance. It would also be a 3-page document. I'm just not showing the third page. We've got a fictitious individual here, Jane. Key thing here is outside IR35, Jane needs to make it abundantly clear that she is running a business. So she's talking about her business, Fiddlesticks Limited. You can see everything highlighted in yellow on page 1, drawing attention to subtle changes from what we just saw with Matt inside IR35 to what Jane's doing outside IR35. So Jane's talking about her business. She's talking about her status as an interim manager in the finance space. She's changing terminology, not career highlights, notable assignments. She's a business, not a job seeker. Not career history or work experience, contracts/experience. She's a business, not a job seeker. And right down the bottom left, not employed or even hired, but engaged. She's a business, not a job seeker. I can't tell you how many contractors have titled their career history employment history, even though for the last year, 2, 3, 5, sometimes 10 years, they've been a contractor. That cannot make sense. That doesn't send the right messages. We'd actually say and suggest to people these days that if you're going outside R35, there's a whole different way of presenting yourself, which is way more effective. And that's to use what we call a case study CV. So the previous 2 samples I showed you were traditional, reverse chronologically ordered CVs. Nothing wrong with them at all. Certain audiences will love them. But if you are acting outside IR35, I'd recommend that in addition to that style of CV, because it works best for some people, and by the way, as a bit of an aside, if you're in financial services, banking, insurance, whatever, that chronological style CV is the one to go with. It's just how their systems are set up. But outside of financial services, outside IR35 roles are best leveraged by presenting demonstrable evidence of your abilities to do good things. And that's why we have this case study CV. It's basically a wall of case studies rather than this kind of seamless career in chronological order or reverse chronological order. It's a far more effective way of communicating capabilities. So you can still see there's introductory text tailored to the role, key skills tailored to the role, then everything changes. And basically what this person, again, a fictitious Jane, is saying is, look, I am an interim manager now, strangely in the world of marketing. I'm running a business, Awesome Marketing Limited, and here's some stuff that I've been up to. And I'm telling you in the form of a case study. And what I'm doing is subtly suggesting that the most important things that I can offer you are on page 1. And then there's some other interesting stuff I can offer you on page 2. And I've handpicked these case studies from my career autobiography to demonstrate my credentials and I'm matching these credentials to your actual requirements. And they're not just some case studies that I've decided to put on here for a laugh. It's here's what I can offer, which I know are going to be relevant to your circumstances because I've done my research, I've asked the questions, I've looked at the brief, I've considered how best to present myself. Uh, just a few points to reinforce this. You're a business, not a job seeker. Don't title the headline text, the introductory text at the top of your CV, personal profile, personal summary, personal overview. It's not about your personality. No one's interested in that. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. They're just not. No one is. What they want to know is, what can you do? What is the return on investment you have to offer someone? Speak like a business, not a job seeker. To get rid of employment history, use a proper email address, a business email address, or at least something that refers to your business, but ideally have your proper business domain. Just imagine if at the end of this webinar, I offered you some spectacularly good discounts on our services, which I will, and then suggested that you could access those offers by sending me an email at squirrelnutkins@hotmail.com. You'd probably think that was a little bit odd. So why would people think any different from your CV? If you're a business and they can access you at squirrelnutkins@hotmail.com, what is that saying? That's not saying that it's the slickest, most professional business offering. As you saw with both Janes, the finance and the marketing Jane, mention your business status, make it obvious. And if you think putting the words contract in brackets after each engagement you've had in your career history section, that's not enough. Some people will never get that far. It needs to be obvious, top of page one, that you're a contractor, independent operator, freelancer, whatever. Use case studies. Get into detail of those later. Avoid certain terminology. Ideally, you want testimonial evidence from previous clients. And you need to give the impression that you're running a business, not looking like you're a job seeker. Really important these days. If we get into the detail of the text on that CV, the bits that really make the difference, if you remember on Matt's and both Jane's CVs, introductory text, right at the top of the CV, it needs to explain clearly what you are, not an IT professional. Again, most people, I'd say way over 80% of the CVs I look at will describe the individual, or the individual will be describing themselves, of course, in some form or fashion where they're an enthusiastic IT professional, a motivated IT professional, a senior IT professional. I mean, there are literally millions of those people. What defines an IT? Who's looking for an IT professional, more to the point, or insert sector professional? So if you're HR professional, sales or marketing professional, whatever you are, describing yourself in such vague terms is next to useless. No one's looking for that. No one will be searching for it. No one I've ever seen ever has entered into a search engine or LinkedIn or a job board. Let us find all the IT professionals, sales professionals, logistics professionals that we can find, because they're what we're after. They don't do it because they'll be buried in results. It will take them forever to weed through them. So they'll look for something very specific. Guess what? It'll be the job title or the role title of the opportunity you're interested in. So you need to own that space. So you can see here, this individual's describing themselves as an experienced IT project manager, and the fact that they're a contractor because they're going for a project management role in IT where they're looking for a contractor. It's not difficult when you think about it, but hardly anybody does this. So you're automatically making yourself just look more relevant by describing yourself in ways and means that mean something to your audience, who will be looking for an IT project manager if that's what they've just posted on a job board with the heading IT project manager, not IT professional. The red text you see scattered in this introductory text is to illustrate a sales technique called features and benefits. If you're going to say you're good at something, and lots of people will say they're good at stuff, that's a problem, because lots of people are claiming it. If you're lining up all the CVs of the candidates that are expressing interest in a role, and they're all saying, I'm expert in delivering high performing solutions, full stop, or I'm good at engaging with senior stakeholders, full stop, how do you decide who to interview? How do you know who might be best? Well, so you don't. You haven't got the faintest idea. So then you start making lottery-like decisions. Who lives closest? Strange things like that may make a difference. You want to remove yourself from that lottery and guarantee, as far as you can, inclusion into the next stage of the process. And you're going to do that by suggesting there's a benefit that will accrue from you being good at something. So that's the red text. It's taking the claim a little bit further. It's giving some justification to the claim you've made. And any skills you reference need to be technical and functional by nature. So that would be tailored to the specific role you're interested in, as then should be that table of key skills. What's Arnold Schwarzenegger got to do with anything? Well, it's the machines ruling the world from Terminator movies. If you remember, we're looking at Matt's CV on the right-hand side of the screen. We've just dealt with that introductory text. The key skills that then follow is not a complete list of everything you can do. It's a subsection or subselection, I should say, of the skills that you have to offer that that specific organization is interested in. Remember, using their terminology, not yours. That's one way to enhance dramatically your chances of getting through the initial filtering stage of a process, because either the human eyes will look at this and think, oh, great, this person's got what we're looking for, or the machines will do exactly the same. Whereas if you use your terminology, if it's different from the organization's way of expressing things, they'll just look at it and think, well, this is not relevant. This is not what we're looking for. And the machines will do exactly the same. Then those case studies or career highlights. Why do we use these? This is the biggest differentiator. Most people don't do this unless they've watched one of our webinars or come to us for help. We do this because for thousands of years, people have told stories to communicate effectively. It works. It makes a difference. People have done research into this, and well-told stories release chemicals into the body that increase levels of trust. I didn't know this until a few months ago when we were putting these sort of slides together, but this is a big deal. This is why people tell stories. And now it's not just storytelling, it's been given a fancy name. The fancy name is narrative marketing, and people have written books on it. It just works. So we thought some time ago we should use case studies on CVs. And do you know what? They actually work. We get people come back to us saying, wow, I was told I was in this interview because of the information presented on my CV in the form of the case studies. So remember, if you've been building your professional autobiography, recording those experiences of your life, your career, you'll have this material. All you need to do is finesse it. And we use STAR, situation, task, actions, result, to finesse the content. And here's an example of such a case study. This actually comes off Matt's CV. In fact, Matt actually did do this a good few years ago. So the first sentence of the case study is the situation, what was going on. Second sentence, task, what was responsibility on Matt's shoulders at that moment in time. The bulk of the remaining text are the actions he took. The final sentence is the result or outcome. Excuse me. It presents to the audience clear evidence of someone's ability to do something. And it gives them enough information for them to think, we can now make a decision. We can differentiate this individual from others. That's the biggest reason for doing it. A lot of people think no one will be bothered to read this. It's too much text. That's nonsense. If it's the right text, if it's the right message, it works. It's beyond any shadow of a doubt now. People use this productively, particularly hiring managers. Critical thing here, they have to be relevant to the audience. They cannot be random. Anybody, anywhere, doing anything for anyone can create case studies. There are just a few examples on the screen. The critical element is it relevant to your audience? It doesn't matter whether you've never saved $1 trillion for someone or reduced costs by several billion pounds, euros, whatever. It's all about what is the audience wanting from you, potentially. And if you can evidence how you'll solve their problems, that's a good indicator that you're on the right track. So if you remember, you've got the advertisement or the brief. You've been able to extract all the important information from that. And you've got in your word processor of choice the list of things that people seem to be bothered about for the role you're interested in. Keep an eye on the running order. So the important stuff tends to be at the top. So that gives you some clues as to what's important for the organization. Remember, I said keep an eye out for that overarching role mission. Why does the role exist? Why do they want someone to come into the business? You convert that into your value proposition statement, which goes into the introductory text at the top of your CV. So if they're saying we're looking for an IT project manager who can come in and do X, Y, and Z, and you're capable of doing that, you flip it and say, I am an IT project manager and I'm capable of doing X, Y, and Z. It's not hard, is it? But hardly anybody does this. You identify the key requirements of the role, and as long as you can deliver on them, you make them the things you reference in that introductory text as being the top 3 or 4 things that you can deliver on. So again, you're appearing relevant. Whereas what most people do is they just randomly say, I'm good at some stuff. I hope you're going to find that interesting. Take the hope out of the equation. Engineer your CV to say, I'm good at the stuff you want someone to be good at, as long as you, of course, can deliver in those areas. Don't forget that features and benefits technique, so that you're not just saying, I'm good at something, full stop. It's not just you have a proven track record in something, full stop. You've got a proven track record as evidenced by your ability to do whatever. There's a benefit that accrues from that feature or skill. Use those star-based case studies. And anything else you pick up about the role from the advertisement, the brief, the conversations, the intel gathering, embed that within the CV somewhere. And if you repeat the right content more than once, that doesn't matter. That's a good thing. And don't forget to use linguistic mirroring. Use the terminology of the organization, not your terminology. Then you'll have an effective CV. A few other techniques to use as far as tweaking those algorithms. It's important to know what these systems are doing, these applicant tracking systems. It's very simple at one level. They're simply looking at your CV, trying to find areas to extract, and then matching those extractions against some preset criteria. It's called matching and parsing. That's the jargon behind it. So anything you can do to engineer the CV to make it easier for the machines to lift the content from your CV and then match it against the right criteria will be to your advantage. So we put the title that you're interested in going for at the top of the CV after your name, and probably embed that within the introductory text at the top of your CV also. Doesn't matter what you're currently called or what you were called last, embed that title somewhere within the CV, as long as you can perform that role. The rest of the CV is then how do you evidence your ability to perform that role. Tailor those key skills. Always look to match content that you've got access to through advertisements, briefs, intel gathering. Always be matching content in everything that you do. The headings that you saw on the sections of CV that I talked you through for Matt and both Janes are the best, if that's the right word, the most appropriate headings to use at the moment. They actually matter quite a lot. They signpost to the machines what content's about to follow on your CV. So if you don't give section headings a title, a lot of people don't call their introductory text anything. They literally put name, address, and then some blurb. There's a real danger the machines will miss that blurb if you haven't told them what's about to happen. So if you say, this is my profile / summary, as Matt and Jane were doing, you're enhancing the chances of the machines latching onto that content, lifting it, matching it against some preset criteria, and hopefully then it works in your favor. Be consistent with how you lay out your CV. This catches a lot of people out who build a CV, then update it 3 years later, then update it 6 months later, and they forget to revisit the earlier part of the CV and update all the formatting. So they have a bit of a hodgepodge. Sometimes they're talking about months and years. Sometimes they're talking about specific dates, months and years. Sometimes they're spelling out the whole month as it actually looks in full. Sometimes they're abbreviating the month. Sometimes they give 4 digits to the year. Sometimes they give 2 digits to the year. This stuff all matters. It makes a difference. Systems hate inconsistencies. Get people to provide testimonial evidence, ideally through recommendations on LinkedIn, and port that across 1 or 2 examples onto the CV, and include a geographic reference on your CV, because some systems now look at that and make decisions. So be wary if you're looking to relocate or pitch for work that may be some distance away. And avoid overly creative CVs with graphics, charts, blobs, slider bars, and such like. Systems hate that stuff at this moment in time. Talked a little bit about linguistic mirroring. Don't want to go through too much more in detail with really visiting this, just to say it is really important. Use the organization's terminology, not yours. I said earlier, if you're getting traction in the marketplace, happy days. If you're not, sad days. But there's something you can do about that. Obviously, I'm bound to say, come knock on our door for help, because we've got a really good track record of helping people, and we do genuinely properly understand the contractor scene. So if that's you, and you'll know pretty soon if you're pursuing work opportunities, new work opportunities, whether you're getting the traction you deserve or not. All I'd say is, if you're not getting that traction, do something about it. Don't sit in your hands thinking something will change, my luck will change. I mean, it might, but that's not a great way. That hope element, it's not great, is it? Do something productive. Earlier, I said you might get asked for a supporting statement. If you are, adhere to it. This will be an optional extra. This will be somebody saying to you, yeah, we like your application so far. We're interested, but we need more information. Now, in fairness, if you've written a really good CV, you probably will never get asked for one of these. But if you're genuinely interested in the opportunity and you're asked for supporting information in whatever form, adhere to the request, because otherwise you'll find yourself rejected pretty quickly. It's often used as a filtering technique. If people respond to this positively, they're in the game still. If they don't, we're not interested in them. It's just a crude way of going from 10 people down to 5. Find out what the requirements are for this supporting information, create a document, and simply answer the questions, ideally using STAR, and ideally using the material from your career or professional autobiography, because it's already there. What this supporting statement will be is evidence of your abilities to perform certain competencies. So you find out what the competencies are, dig up the relevant examples from your professional autobiography, present that back to the intermediary who's asked for it. Job done. That's as best you can do. They will then use, whoever the intermediary is, they will use that information to sell you back up the line. And then finally, in the sense of the steps, what do you do if you get to interviews? I suggested earlier that you could use your professional autobiography to perform better at interviews. So we talked about how you can do it on CVs using those star-based case studies. By the way, you can use those star-based case studies on LinkedIn. There's a great place for them in your profile, but you can also perform far better at interviews or client meetings by using that raw data. So you're going to get asked for asked questions at interview, of course. Typically, please give us an example of a time when you've done something or other. If you've refreshed your professional autobiography, if you've revised it to a degree, you're going to have something in your grey matter that's going to be ahead of your competitors. And you'll be able to say, oh, actually, yeah, there are a couple of examples. Let me give you one. And then you use STAR verbally to deliver the answer. There was a time when I was at such and such an organization, situation. At that time, I was performing such and such a role, task. I did some stuff, actions, and the result, the outcome, the conclusion was whatever it was. Result. Less than a minute or two, a really concise, coherent answer. If you're going for interviews, we always encourage our clients to see these as sales opportunities. It's a sales call, which for a contractor, of course, it is. You're trying to win a piece of work. Every salesperson is taught a sales process if they're any good at what they do. An interview is no different. There is a process. There's the rapport building. Make sure you're pleased to be there. You're looking pleased to be there, virtually or physically. Use the intel you've gathered to build bridges. Oh yeah, I've seen you've just bought this piece of kit, or you've been taken over by, or you've merged with, or you've launched that. Really interesting. That I love that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll get into that during the interview. It's just building those nice links with people. You're going to ask questions, but you should also ask questions. If you ask the right questions, you're teeing up a great opportunity to sell your benefits later on in the interview. What are your challenges? What are your stresses? What's causing you a loss of sleep? Maybe not quite that question, but the sentiment is right. And if you get an answer, oh, do you know what? We're having a nightmare with system A to system B migration. You store that away. Come the point that it's appropriate, you sell the benefits of what you could do to give them a better night's sleep. You can do system A to system B migration with your eyes shut. It's a really good thing to do. Don't be afraid to ask whether there are any objections or people have any reservations about your ability to do things, because it brings it out into the open. You can deal with it. And although you can't bang on the table and demand the role there and then, you can make sure you let them know you're genuinely interested in the opportunity. Just that can make a big difference to outcomes. So this really has been about how you present yourself to the big bad world. You're a tradesperson, I guess in most cases. If you relied on a commercial vehicle to sell your wares, who do you want to be like? The battered white transit or the people who've taken a little bit more time and effort to present themselves in an appropriate way? They are appealing to their target audience by suggesting that they can deliver a certain service to a certain type of person for a certain reason. Whereas the battered white transit, we haven't got the faintest idea what's going on there, but it doesn't look good. If you want another tortured analogy, how about Bananarama? If you've never been on one of our sessions before, you may think I've gone mad. There is a reason for this. This is Bananarama. I think they still exist. They've probably reformed several times. So the issue is everybody can do the basics, write a CV, a LinkedIn profile, attend interviews. So it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what this session has been about. And that's what genuinely gets results. And if you remember Bananarama, they sang a song with Funboy 3 that said, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. And that's what gets results. So I promised a link, and there is a link. Just thought I'd give you a final piece of feedback from somebody who's been through our process. We get lots of these. This is not the only one we've ever received. If you're a skeptic, we genuinely get lots of these. This is just one example. This is someone who was really struggling. And all we did was change the way they presented themselves, gave them the hints, the tips, the guidance that you've just got for free. And they went out and got results. It can make a big difference. If you'd like to replicate that kind of success, here are a few things that we can do. From left to right, we could just re-engineer your CV for £50 less than it would ordinarily cost. We'll spend some time with you, gather information. You'll be partnered with someone who's at your level, who knows your industry, who understands the contract scene, if that's what you're wanting to do. If you said, actually, I want to go back into a permanent existence, we match you with the appropriate person and draw up the CV accordingly. But let's assume that you're all wanting to go out and win work. So that's a CV in isolation. If you fancied adding the LinkedIn service to that, it doesn't cost much more. And there's an even bigger saving. That's the most popular thing we do. If you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, I could be going for 3 different types of role. I could do PM, I could do BA, I could do change management. No problem. We'll just write you more content. So there's a package there, the third column along from the left, where we'll write you a CV, a LinkedIn profile, but we'll give you extra material so you can position your CV to 2 or 3 different audiences. And if at any stage in the process we thought you'd benefit from a different style of CV, so for example, you started off with a chronological inside IR35 CV style, but then suddenly thought actually you'd like a slightly more innovative outside 35 case study style CV, well, fine, we can address that either before or during the process. And each additional style of CVs, £100 plus VAT. All of those services reside at the sorry, not the QR code. I'll come on to that in a minute. At the URL code, bright yellow, top of the screen, top right of the screen. That's where the special offers lurk. They're valid for a week. And the QR code is an IPSE survey code. And if you zap that, you'll be able to comment on whether you found this useful or not, and whether I should ever appear again in front of you. So perhaps zap that and let Sarah know what you thought about the session. That concludes the session. Thank you for your time. There was a question there might have been other questions, but there certainly was a question asked before the event. I don't know whether Mark is on, but Mark asked a question about how do you deal with career gaps and health issues on a CV, which is a really sometimes challenging issue to deal with. So as briefly as possible, Mark, it all depends is a rather sit on the fencey kind of an answer. if the gap is relatively small, and particularly if it was some time ago, and depending on the style of CV that you might adopt, you may never need to get to explain or have to explain that. If you remember, if you were on that case study style CV I showed you earlier for outside IR35 opportunities would be fantastic for not having to deal with those gaps, because the focus is on things that you can do, not where have you been these last few years. On the chronological style CV for inside IR35 roles or certain types of outside IR35 roles, confusingly, finance sector in particular being one of them, then you might need to mention the gaps. And it all comes down to how long they were and how recent they were. So, for example, if they were quite recent, maybe you've been out of action for a couple of years and you're needing to get back into work, probably you're going to have to mention something or describe somehow that all is well and you're moving forward, if that's obviously the case. Because otherwise people will think it odd that you've been out since, say, 2022, and now you're getting back in, and there's no explanation for that. That's a big ask for someone to just absorb, and folks sadly will always think the worst. Quite happy to talk about that offline, Mark, if you wanted to drop us an email. By the way, email address is top right of the slide as well, that info@email address. By all means, send me something if you'd like to have a discussion about that offline. There are lots of ways and means of dealing with it, Mark, that defer the relevance of it so far as your CV is concerned. So it sort of takes the sting out of it if you're afraid it might be a sting. Maybe worth talking about separately offline. I think I've got chat. I can't, Sarah, if you're there now, I can't see any separate questions. Is that right, or is it because
there's a couple in the webinar chat from Ian. Can you see those ones,
right?
Alistair?
Let me
I can
just
read them out to you.
I'm trying to get this chat presented. Oh, sorry, I got it now. Yeah, sorry, I was just clicking the wrong area. So Ian, yeah, right to substitute is tricky. I sell my unique. By the way, if you're wondering why on earth I'm looking over in the far distance at a strange angle, it's because of the way my system's set up. But let me just see if I can do something about that quickly and drag you across. No, it's not going to drag. So right to substitute is tricky. I sell my unique experience and services. Do I need to find a trusted person with a similar profile as a backup? Yeah, in a way, it helps because it does tick the right to substitute, but you can only do what you can do. Yeah, it is tricky. You're right. But so far as your CV and marketing collateral is concerned, you probably don't need to worry too much about that really at this stage. And nobody will be that bothered about it in terms of the presentation. It might be something that comes up later in the process. Can I include pre-contract experience in the outside IR35 type CV? Yes, you can. If it's the chronological style and it's relevant to your audience, absolutely, it would form part of the history that you've got. If it were the case study style CV and relevant, you might not have spotted it, and I didn't draw attention to it, but there is a space on the case study style CV for your timeline. It's just much more secondary in focus. It was down the bottom of page 2, basically, and it's just a one line for everything that you've done. And in that set of one lines, you could include pre-contract experience, be that PAYE, whatever else that you were up to, if you thought it was relevant. No obligation to list everything, and certainly no obligation to list any early career stuff that you might fear would cause age discrimination. So again, it's all depending on circumstances that would inform as to what you include and what you don't include. And that's it, I think, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah.
There's one in the
Oh,
Q&A, Alistair. Can you see that one?
Hang on. Do, 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 do. Oh yeah, for some strange reason, that's now in the more section rather than helpfully, rather than a nice big. So Jamin, I'm not sure if, anyway, you know who you are. What's the current recommendation for CV length, number of pages? Also a good question. So for most people who've got any decent amount of experience, no matter it be PAYE, contract or whatever, let's say more than 10 years experience, maybe even more than 8 years experience, 3 pages is probably where it's going to be at. They may not be full, but 3 pages. What's super important is page 1, as I demonstrated earlier, has to be knockout. So it doesn't matter whether 2 or 3 pages follow on from the first page. What really does matter is page 1 is really important. These days, applicant tracking systems are influenced by relevant content. If you try and shrink your CV into 2 or even 1 page, you are at real danger of just not triggering the algorithms because they love content. Now, that's not an excuse to send somebody a 100-page monstrosity, but what it does mean is you cannot skimp. There is a balance between what the humans will tolerate and what the machines will tolerate. The machines will tolerate lots. They love content. The humans will tolerate the right content first, and then they don't really matter what follows as long as they've got a real clear indication that you're the right type of person quite quickly. And that's all about page 1. But most of the time, most of our CVs, 3 pages. Right. Yes, I think that's it, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. Okay.
I think that's it. Yeah, and thanks to Mark for your comment as well.
Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Alistair. That was really good. And I downloaded your workbook at the beginning of the webinar as well. So I've been having a look through that. So this is new. I like it. This is good. So I hope everyone managed to get a copy of that as well. I might try and include that QR code in the email I send out to everyone if I'm clever about it, but let's see how we get on with that. So I'll give that a go. But yeah, we'll send a recording out to everyone tomorrow. If you do have any other questions for Alistair or anything that comes to later on, then please do feel free just to email me back from the email tomorrow, and I'll pass it on to Alistair. And yeah, you've got the info address, info@cv-and-interviewadvisors.co.uk if you want to email him directly as well. Please feel free to do that. So for now, we will leave it there. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you again, Alistair, and see you again soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye.